Welcome back, friends, family, and of course, I have to come back and finish this story. If you guys were here at the original watch party today on a Monday, best damn day of the week at noon, I had to jump off and go do damage report with John Iderola. As I come off of that hour and a half, I gotta keep talking because I don't know how to shut the hell up. There's a little bit more going on. In case you guys were watching before, we were talking about the latest in Jeffrey Epstein cover-up that appears to be going on with this administration. And what we have now is folks that are trying to clear their name while also trying to um, continue to cover for Donald Trump and his cover up. We were talking about Tim Burchett. I'm gonna replay the last video that we just had as a few of you guys come back in. Christina Brown, good to see you again. Abby Normal and Allison Ald. Hey, what's going on, y'all? So as I was talking about, we mentioned Tim Burchett, the congressman from Tennessee, on CNN talking about why he may not necessarily trust all the information that may come out in order to help Donald Trump get that soft landing if or when his name finally gets revealed in these files. I want to replay that, and we're going to come back to breaking down why he's as cowardly and unprincipled as he obviously is. Let's go back to this.
You've co-sponsored the bipartisan Epstein Files Transparency Act, which would force the House to vote on whether or not to release all government files on Epstein. What exactly do you think the government is withholding here?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, ma'am. I applaud the president and Attorney General Bondi for wanting to release the grand jury files. I believe that'll pretty much cover everything. But I would give everybody a caveat, or that's a big word, but a warning that just because somebody flew on a plane doesn't mean they're a dadgum pedophile. I have a lot of wealthy friends. I aspire to be wealthy, but I've taken a vow of poverty because my daughter rides horses. So, but I have a lot of wealthy friends, and they fly on people's planes, and their plane will be down, and they'll say, "Hey, we're going somewhere, and we got an extra seat. Do you want to go?" And they don't even know the person on the plane. So, that's one of the things I worry about too, because President Trump admitted that he flew on his dadgum plane, and so I worry about some innocent people. I worry about there's over 1,000 people that this dirt bag apparently offended, and currently I believe the devil's dealing with him.
So he takes some solace in figuring that the devil is dealing with Jeffrey Epstein. So who cares? Who really notices? And by the way, as these flight logs come out, there's no way that, some people may end up on the dadgum plane. It doesn't mean that they're all like working with him and doing the things that he was all about. So obviously this is, trying to provide some kind of help to Donald Trump in case that name then eventually comes out. It's a part of the next stages of this whole process. But there was something he mentioned in there about the grand jury testimony, because Donald Trump said that he's asking the DOJ to release the grand jury information about the Epstein case because that'll hopefully pacify the folks who keep saying, when are you going to keep these promises that you kept saying that you were going to take care of as soon as you got in office, along with the 27 other things that he said he's going to do as soon as he got into office. So this grand jury testimony that they want to release, NBC News talked about it. And they pointed out exactly what that would mean and why it doesn't mean much.
Still do not have filing from the Department of Justice for the grand jury documents that the president said he was instructing the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, to take action in this way, to ask the court, and it is subject to the court's review, to release certain Epstein-related grand jury transcripts. That is a very small part of the overall government possession of evidence, witness information, all the different components of what have been commonly referred to as Epstein files. This would be a narrow piece of that. So the grand jury would be a transcript of witnesses brought before the grand jury as prosecutors were seeking to get an indictment from the grand jury that was impaneled at the time. They do not bring all of their witnesses, and a transcript would not include the supplemental documentation. Here is a report to look at. When they're questioning witnesses, if they use supplemental documents or records or phone records or videos or any of the things that we would think of as evidence, That doesn't go into a grand jury transcript. It's the question and the answer, and it can be narrow, more narrow than the number of witnesses overall. So it is a slice of what is commonly thought of as the Epstein files. It's not a foregone conclusion that a judge would release this material, but this is a step in the process that the Department of Justice in the Trump administration can take to perhaps quiet some of the concerns of the MAGA base.
Are we paying attention? So, as Tim Burchett was happy with the sliver of information that may come from the grand jury testimony, because he has to find some kind of way to act like he actually wants this information to be released, while at the same time covering for Donald Trump. You hear the NBC News correspondent that was talking about how it's just a small piece of the actual information, very sliver, even, I think she said. And they don't bring all these witnesses, and they don't bring all the witnesses, and they also wouldn't include supplemental documentation that would be more evidence. It's small, and it's pretty much going to keep him in the clear while he passes this off as him releasing the Epstein files, because he assumes the people that follow him and listen to everything that he says are stupid. That's not me just saying it because I think so. The things that he's doing and the actions that you would take to try and cover things up with this very thin veil of a cover-up, of you releasing these documents in this kind of way, and people can obviously find out and report that it's not really what it is that you said you're going to release, shouldn't they be offended by this? At some point, aren't you offended by the guy who keeps saying that you're dumb enough to just be dragged along? And when you finally get upset about it, he says, I don't want your support. There's no other politician in history that's ever been able to do stuff like this, blatantly tell his supporters that they're stupid and he doesn't want them, and they still follow along right with him. That is especially when the information continues to come out. By the way, we were talking about that. Is this Dick Durbin? We were talking about that grand jury testimony coming out and what Donald Trump is asking for in it. But even as they were doing it, Dick Durbin discovered that the folks in the Justice Department and FBI specifically were told something very curious. Let me read this. So there was a series of oversight letters written to Attorney General Pam Bondi. And that's what FBI Director Kash Patel and FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino. He sent it to all of them. Durbin questioned Bondi about the contradictions in her public statements on the case, which we've heard about. Patel, he reached out about reports that he was pressured by Bondi to place, this is the big part, 1,000 personnel on 24-hour shifts to mine 100,000 Epstein-related records, and Bongino about reported disputes among Trump officials and their lack of transparency in their handling of this whole thing. So in these letters that he sent on Friday, Durbin, who was on the Senate Judiciary Committee, asked each of the Trump administration officials to respond to that information received by his office that suggested that this personnel were specifically instructed to flag, after they're scouring through it, to flag any records mentioning Trump. This is what he said. My office was told that these personnel were instructed to flag any records which Trump was mentioned. Why were personnel told to flag records in which Trump was mentioned, is what he asked all three of them. What happened to the records mentioning Trump once they were flagged? So, of course, they haven't received any information yet. I'm sure none of them really care whether or not he sent those letters and asking for information. They'll just say fake news. Well, you can easily clear all that up with some reality that I guess isn't fake news. That's Dick Durbin then going after them as well, still breaking this whole thing down. But I want to go right back to Tim Burchett, because after all this has happened, he's asking for the Department of Justice to release just the grand jury testimony. He's also wanting to cover Donald Trump by also saying he wants more of it sent out. And all this centers back around Pam Bondi, who he said, I think a week ago, that he doesn't trust. I want you guys to see how quickly his tone changed on how much he trusts Pam Bondi and her fumbling of things from the very beginning.
I think her commitment with us early on was not as good. I mean, the binder, for instance, that she put out, I was very excited about that. But then I found the contents of it. I think it was her limited knowledge and her and taking advice from the wrong people, which you do a lot of in Washington. There's plenty of people to give you advice, but when it turns out not good, you turn around and they're nowhere to be found. And I think that's what she did in the beginning. I think if she turns the corner, I have a saying, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. If she finishes strong on this, then I'm all for it. I'm sure the learning curve is steep. And I think she blundered in the beginning. I really do, as most Americans do. because those white notebook that those young folks, those influencers walked out with, I thought that was it. And then when I started digging into it, it was stuff that I like my postings on Twitter, or X, but that's about the limit of my computer knowledge. But even I could find those things on the internet that were already out there. So I think they blundered in the beginning, but I think they're going to finish strong.
Only in this administration can you call what Pam Bondi's been doing blundering at the beginning. And it was just a learning curve that she had to go through to be the Attorney General of the United States of America. It's a learning curve that she had to go through. So when she promised that there was a bunch of there's all this information on her desk, it was a learning curve. When she then handed out all these binders to these folks, it was a part of her learning curve. It was a couple blunders at the beginning. Bro, the level of accountability that they expect from all of these DEI hires, as they talk about DEI hires, these incompetent people that illustrate exactly how incompetent they are on a daily basis, or I'm sorry, corrupt on a daily basis. You can easily get folks who pass on the baton down to legislators like Tim Burchett to go, I mean, Pam Bondi just has a little bit of a learning curve to go through. Yo, she hasn't been attorney general before. What is it that she's going to have to do to finally figure out that telling everyone you've got a stack of information, Epstein files on your desk, and you're about to release them in days, where that has to do with you learning the right way? The only thing she learned is that she has to lie better and she has to find different ways to cover Donald Trump's ass. That's the learning curve. Especially since the learning curve goes up against information that continues to be released from the New York Times about these alleged victims of this cover-up of Epstein and Donald Trump's relationship. We started at the top talking about, I believe it was Stacey. We started talking about Stacey Williams, who had information about things that had happened to her and around Donald Trump. But there's more that the New York Times talked about. It's reading time. I'm going to make sure you guys see some of this that happened. There's more going on with folks. Let me see which one this was. This is more on their sexual assault relationship with folks that they got around. Here, let me go straight to this. So this is him and Jeffrey Epstein's relationships from the New York Times. Months later, Trump hosted a party at Mar-a-Lago for young women in a so-called calendar girl competition. Epstein was the only other guest at this whole thing. And that's according to George Honore, who's a Florida-based businessman who arranged this whole thing. So three of these guys all got together and said there's going to be this calendar girl competition. Mr. Honore recalled being surprised that Epstein was the only other person on this guest list. I said, Donald, this is supposed to be a party with VIPs. That's what he told the New York Times in 2019. Before this, by the way. He said, you're telling me it's you and Epstein? Yes, as was told in other stories, when a woman would show up in an office building and Donald Trump would show up and start groping her, according to her story. These all kind of fall together with this. There's more on this. Here's the next. Mr. Orone's then girlfriend and business partner, Jill Harth, later accused Mr. Trump of sexual misconduct on the night of the party. And in a lawsuit, she said that Trump took her into a bedroom and forcibly kissed and fondled her and restrained her from leaving. She also said that a 22-year-old contestant told her that Trump later that same night crawled into her bed uninvited. Ms. Harth dropped her lawsuit in 1997 after a related case filed by Honore, however you say his name, was settled by Trump, who has denied her allegations. I want to continue to bring up the dates here. So every time that someone says these folks are conveniently stepping up right now as all this blows up in his face, this is 1997. She dropped her lawsuit in 1997 after he came to some settlement with her then boyfriend. How would that woman, who can see the future into Donald Trump becoming president in 2016, and then in 2024, after he wins a second time, has to get caught up with this whole Epstein thing, but she told that story to make sure she destroys him that many years later. The excuses just don't make any sense. These are people's full accounts. There's another one, Maria Farmer. We talked about this on the damage report, but there's way more information. I want you guys to go to the details of her story, again, from like 1995. Let's go to this. Maria Farmer. who has said she was victimized by Epstein, and Ms. Maxwell described an encounter with Trump in 1995 at an office that Epstein once kept in New York City. An art student who had moved to New York to pursue a career as a painter, Ms. Farmer recalled in a 2019 interview that when she was introduced to Trump, he eyed her, and that prompted Epstein to say, "She's not for you." Also, Ms. Farmer's mother, Janice Swain, said her daughter had described the interaction with Trump around the time that it happened. So her mom is lying. Maria Farmer apparently is lying. Apparently, even more so when she continued on with the details of what it is that they were up to. It was the summer of 1996 when Maria Farmer went to law enforcement to complain about Jeffrey Epstein. She went to law enforcement. At the time, she said she had been sexually assaulted by Epstein and his longtime partner, Ghislaine Maxwell. Ms. Farmer, then in her mid-20s, had also learned about a troubling encounter that her younger sister, at the time a teenager, had endured at Epstein's ranch in New Mexico. And she described facing threats from Epstein. Ms. Farmer said that when she discussed her concerns with the New York Police Department and then with the FBI, she also urged them to take a broader look at the people in his orbit, including Donald Trump, then still 2 decades from being elected president. She repeated that message, she said, when the FBI interviewed her again about Epstein in 2006. And 2006, of course, is when things started hitting the fan for Jeffrey Epstein. And then when they had those deals, what didn't even do much to him, which then later he got caught up with things and ended up in jail. But at the time, she spoke to the police department. She spoke to the FBI and said, "Hey, listen, I think you should maybe check out his broader circles because these guys keep popping up and asking questions like, is she for you or is she for me?" Things like that, that kind of show their relationship. There's more. The story of Ms. Farmer's efforts to call law enforcement attention to Mr. Epstein and his circle shows how the case files could contain material that is embarrassing or politically problematic to Trump, even if it's largely extraneous to Epstein's crimes and was never fully investigated or corroborated. And it underscores the complexities of opening up to scrutiny all the leads that investigators pursued, the evidence they gathered, and the interviews that they conducted, little of which ever went before a judge or a jury. So at this point, this is the part of the normal process when law enforcement, in many cases, don't continue investigations into sexual assault, don't continue investigations into someone being identifying the person who potentially assaulted them, and then they just bury things. Rape kits don't get examined, investigations don't happen. So then later, 35 years later, when people ask, well, how come she didn't come forward with this? She did. The people on the other side of coming forward didn't pick it up. So now, as this high-profile case hits the things that it's hitting now, there's no evidence, there's no judge or jury that saw it, there's no paperwork based behind it. Not because she didn't do what she could do to try and remedy the situation or get the people that victimized her, but maybe it's the people that didn't want to do anything about it. And the last question is, why didn't they do anything about it? Here's more, bro. There's so much. I'm sorry there's so much reading, but you know what? This is what they don't expect you to do. Ms. Farmer said that she had long wondered how law enforcement agencies handled her complaints in 96 and 2006. She had to sit back and wonder, what did they do with all that information I gave them? And she said she's been wondering in particular whether federal authorities did anything with her concerns about Trump. She said that she raised his name both times, not only because he seemed so close to Epstein, but because of an encounter which she had previously described publicly, where she said that she had with Mr. Trump and Epstein in his New York office that we've been hearing about. So as she's still looking for someone to maybe do something about this whole thing, nothing, absolutely nothing has been done. Here's the last bit, sorry, you guys. Because again, there's reasons why we're looking at what we're looking at and why things are continue to get covered up, because it's been covered up for decades. In her first interviews with the Times in 2019, Maria Farmer said that before she talked to the FBI, she first spoke to the 6th precinct of the New York Police Department. And those records show that she had done that in August of 1996. Law enforcement agencies have not released records of any FBI report that Ms. Farmer made in 1996. But handwritten notes from the interview agents did with her a decade later match her account, including that 6th 6th Precinct told MF to call FBI. That's Maria Farmer. The portions of those FBI records that have been released do not mention Trump, but much of the account remains redacted. And of course, the FBI didn't even respond to a request. It's loads of information. It's loads of accounts on video. It's loads of notes that have been taken, but they never finished doing the whole process. And there's a big reason why they never finished doing the whole process, because as I pointed out last week, which I'm about to let you know, show you guys here again, the people in power had power, and they want to make sure, as people in power do, that they never get caught for it. And as those people in power make sure they never get caught for it, the law enforcement that they fund and tell what to do, because that's what rich and powerful criminals do. They control law enforcement. They make sure that they're afraid to do anything about it. So as soon as it's keyed that there's something they can do about it, currently Kash Patel, currently Dan Bongino, and currently Pam Bondi, every time they talk about it, they look shook, scared to death over what can happen if they actually start telling the truth. And as I said, I showed you guys last week, Cindy McCain, I think she said it pretty clearly.
It's like, it hides in plain sight. Epstein was hiding in plain sight. We all knew about him. We all knew what he was doing, but we had no one that was legal aspect that would go after him. They were afraid of him for whatever reason. They were afraid of him.
Law enforcement was afraid of him. For whatever reason, they couldn't go after him. We all knew what Epstein was doing. Well, when you got the law in your pocket, you don't have to worry about it because you control the law. But, Tim Burchett wants all the information to come out. That's all I want to tell you guys. I really wanted to get in the deep details of how extensive this cover-up goes. It doesn't just start in 2025 with Donald Trump in the White House trying to cover this up. They've been covering up since forever. The people that come out now, don't say they just came out. They've come out since the 90s and probably before that with other instances. So let's stop acting like it isn't what it is. It's a continued cover-up that transcends multiple administrations, multiple political parties, and multiple rich elite people. They all stick together. Okay, you guys. See you, Abby. See you guys. See you, childless cat mama. All you guys out there. I got to go do some extra work here, you guys, but we'll be back tomorrow for more. Of course, another watch party on a Tuesday. I'm going to try not to go over, so I have to do extras like this, but still, I'll be there 5 minutes on time, I promise. Have a good day, you guys. I guess still the best damn day of the week. We'll catch you guys on a Tuesday, which is, a little bit worse, but still okay. See you.